and welcome to Healing Solidarity, the conference about reimagining international development. I'm your conference initiator, Marianne Clements, writer and consultant and facilitator of the Replenishment Room. And this conversation is with Deborah Doane. In our conversation, Deborah and I talk about power and international development and the things that need to shift about it. And we also talk about what some alternative approaches to being in solidarity and working for social justice with activists and movements across the world might look like. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Deborah as much as I enjoyed having it. Hi, I'm here with Deborah Doane. She has 20 years experience working in the civil society sector. She also blogs regularly for The Guardian on international development issues. And I'm really excited to talk to her today. Hi.
Hi.
So, Deborah, I wanted to start by asking you about the piece that you wrote for The Guardian after the Oxfam scandal, as it's become known. So, you wrote something that in some ways I wish I'd written, in the sense that I'd been thinking, you know, this is not just about the thing that happened or the things that are happening in terms of sexual abuse in the sector, but it's also about the sector and power, basically. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about that and what you think needs to shift in terms of the power in the sector generally.
So, you know, when I started in international development, I headed up a project called the Humanitarian Ombudsman Project, and that was after. I hope you don't mind giving you some context.
No, please do.
After the evaluation of Rwanda, of the Rwanda response, and there was a recommendation that the aid agencies were unaccountable, that they needed to be more responsive to what was then termed beneficiaries of assistance, and less patronizing, less harmful, and so on. And we actually set up a kind of quasi-ombudsman for humanitarian aid, which morphed into other accountability mechanisms.
Yeah.
That was late 90s.
Yeah.
Dating myself here. 20 years later, we're still having the same discussions.
Yeah.
The sector itself, the decisions are made by, quite frankly, white men in the North.
Yeah.
Funding decisions, management decisions. You know, you get a few token the INGO sector moving to the South, but all I hear, you know, from where I stand in my work, is that they're crowding out local organizations. They're not actually shifting power to the South, and I think that's the main thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I just want to go into that a bit. So yeah, we've seen quite a lot of organizations doing that move to the South thing, but what makes it possible for them to crowd out space, you think? Like come in and take space away from local organizations?
We still, you know, and I'm a white northerner, right?
Yeah.
We still have the power. We have the access. We have the certain style of Western education. We know how to say the right things in the right places. We have access to decision makers.
Yeah.
And, you know, even with losing income, the decisions and the power still wield with us. And I think it's a northern dominated, call it what you like, neo-colonial sector that hasn't genuinely, in my view, really shifted sufficiently to deal with that power. And that happens on a gender basis, on a culture basis, on a class basis, and so on. And, you know, the Oxfam scandal is just indicative of that.
Yeah.
You know, we heard so much about the whistleblowers, the people who spoke out, but you know, still not enough was done. It was all about protecting the brand, protecting our income, protecting our organization, not about what was really needed to be accountable to those people on whose behalf we're working and with, you know, those people we are working with.
Yeah, and very little about the kind of communities or people who were affected by anything that happened, or really
no. In fact, an old friend of mine who's Haitian wrote to me and she said, where are the Haitian voices in all of this? And I actually did a trawl. So I was writing a piece for a Latin American journal on this as well, which is coming out shortly, to find out where were the pieces on, from Southern newspapers, from Southern writers? There was very little, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have voice, and we have a responsibility to use that voice differently.
Yeah. And what does that look like, using our voices differently? Like, I'm thinking of people like day to day working in organizations thinking, yeah, I see what they're saying. But what does it really look like to kind of let go of our power, do you think, and use our voices differently?
Well, to be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
Yeah, me too.
It's a constant challenge and a check on my own humility and ego and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't like a bit of power?
Right.
And especially if you think you're doing good. What does it mean to give up, to use your voice and to give up power? And I said, this is still something I'm struggling with. It means using your voice in a more facilitative way, I think, rather than this is what needs to be done way, although I do that.
Yeah.
But if I'm articulating, say, a policy position to a Western decision maker, that policy decision needs to be grounded in what's guided by the South.
Yeah.
What do you think? It needs to be not just, I'm going to put my position out there, but it needs to be highly formulated in solidarity with those struggling to fight the battles.
Yeah.
And too much we're stuck in that charity mentality rather than that solidarity and advocacy mentality. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I may have alluded to this in the article. I can't even remember. But when I was director of WDM, we were campaigning on food speculation, so speculation in global food commodities, and really working quite directly with the food sovereignty movement. And that was people who really believed in a certain way of farming, with Livia Campesina, a lot of social movements in the global South, guiding what it was they wanted us to put forward and the battles that we could fight. So we could fight food speculation. We were based in the City of London or Wall Street or whatever. I remember calling head of policy at a large INGO and said, this is what we're going to be working on. And this person simply said to me, well, I don't really buy the food sovereignty movement, and we're doing our research. We'll get back to you. Mm-hmm. So it was that was kind of the difference. At World Development Movement, we worked very much in solidarity and side by side with those in the global South, whereas the INGO sector was very much about using their expertise to decide what was right for the South in their mind. Yeah. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that difference. And I also see, like, often there's been this sort of way of using the language of sort of being in solidarity and participating, and not always it living out in practice. So I feel like it's, like you said, like a constant thing, because sometimes we talk about, like, I see people talk about participation and involving people, and then what they're really doing is involving people in the agenda that they already had, for example, or, and so there's some subtleties to it as well, isn't there? What does it really mean to do it and to keep doing it,
It is, and it's a constant check. If you're in a position of power, it's a constant check, and it's really difficult. I always ask, my colleagues in the South, and then also, even you have to recognize in the South you get other power dynamics about elitism and so on, and representation. So, I'm always asking, am I doing the right thing? Is this what's needed? Rather than forging ahead. Now, obviously, you get 20 plus years of experience, and you get a sense of a bit of what's needed, but you still have to put those power dynamics in check.
How you keep asking.
Yeah. I think there's another aspect that's really important that I've been trying to think about. And I think if we were to really transform these power relations, we'd really look at our governance models, I think. Who owns these organizations? And I wrote in The Guardian about the issue of the fact that, one of the main aid agencies, or a lot of them, are highly funded by government. One of the main ones is 75% funded by government. There's something that's not independent, and I'm right about that to me, in terms of acting really side by side in solidarity with those in the global South. So who makes these decisions, and how are they made, I think is fundamentally important for the sector.
Yeah, I wonder. I've thought for a long time that insisting on local organisations having governance structures that sort of replicate the ones that we have, because they're sort of the law in this country for charities and stuff, has felt a little bit uncomfortable for me, because I feel like what's much more likely to be accountable is a structure that works in a context, and that it doesn't always look identical. And I also often feel like our governance structures don't always work, perfectly well, right?
I mean, let's not romanticize everything. I have lived in a country where, it was local governance structures, but it was the elite that held those positions,
right,
kept them down. Let's not over romanticize these things. I think there are some principles that we have to put into place about what a more equal power relationship looks like.
Yeah.
But you're right, let's not just replicate our systems, but it's also in the northern governance systems, in an INGO, who are the boards of these organizations? That's where a lot of the Save the Children stuff came up with, and the Oxfam one, the board was protecting the CEO, the senior management teams.
Yeah.
Who are the boards? You look at them, they're the elite from the corporate sector, quite often, maybe civil society or academia, if you're lucky. You might get a token brown person on there, maybe two, but they are not representative in any way, shape, or form of the people that we're allegedly working on behalf of. There's another dynamic which we have to think about too, is the fact, and this is where I really did appreciate some of the work that, say, Oxfam has done. Inequality issues, the issues that we're working on, let's stop thinking about it as a Southern development problem. Structural problems around the world. And I think the more and more we think about that it's a global situation, the more we're likely to, I think, give up power and work alongside. I think that's also really important.
Yeah, that we don't see poverty as something over there, but actually something that we're implicated in.
Structures that are the same structures that brought about Brexit and Trump and everything else.
So for someone working in an INGO on in project-based kind of context, where it's like, here's a 3-year project to do X and Y and Z in a community, or for a community, or even alongside a community, what does this sort of shift look like? Do we have to throw everything up in the air and start again?
Been asking myself that very question. It's a good question. No, if you think about an analogy in the corporate sector and sustainability, is it the new kind of renewable energy companies that are really going to be the future, or are you going to transform Shell and BP to becoming the renewable energy company of the future? Right. It's probably going to take both. I think you're probably going to need an innovative startup that says, what is the INGO of the future? Let's start from now. Here's how it could work. And then you probably also need to look at the big oil tankers and say, how can they shift? Part of me thinks we just need to start again, but then another part of me thinks, there is a role for INGOs. We need INGOs. They play a really important role on different levels. But things like humanitarian work, that needs to absolutely shift to the South. Yeah. Absolutely. There's so much capacity to do humanitarian work in the global South, but they're not getting the funding directly. Yeah. I know a woman who runs an amazing organization based in Nairobi, working in South Sudan and Kenya and that part of the world. And she's got staff of 200 and zero core funding.
Yes.
Doing humanitarian and development work, and she can't seem to get it. That's outrageous.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
Yeah.
There are lots of organizations who can be scaled up and supported to deliver that vital assistance. Why we're shuttling all these people from the north to the south is beyond me. I saw an advert just yesterday on LinkedIn advertising for a country director for, I can't remember the NGO, for Liberia. And it was a classic development program. I said, why are you using a northern headhunter looking in the UK for this role? Why?
Yeah. So all those practices they do feel like they're well out of sync with.
So your original question was, do we have to start again? Probably, but I still think we should be able to shift some of the oil tankers as well.
Yeah, and I wonder what, like, if for people working in oil tankers, I like the analogy. I think about, like, what can people who are working in an oil tankers day to day and actually feel like that, you know, they want to work on issues that matter to them. Like, in what ways might they sort of create small change within them? Because I sort of feel like there's lots of passionate people who probably relate to a lot of what we're saying, who are kind of in the oil tankers, you know, and they probably not on the boards.
And I feel really bad when there were some Oxfam people at a meeting where I was at, and I was asking them, how did it feel, you know, the whole scandal, how did it affect you? And they said, it was horrible. I said, we're doing amazing work. So Africans, and it's really, you know, had a harm on our brand. We can't get government funding, various issues they were really, really deeply concerned about. And I think they were genuinely doing good work.
Yeah.
No, all of them. So there are very good people with good intentions, and I don't want to take from people. But I do think, I think first of all, if there's a job that comes up for a Westerner to go work in as a country head, don't do it. You know, just don't do it. Think about, what is my role in change? Is it really going to be to manage a country office where there's perfectly well-educated, capable people of managing, who manage differently in a non-Western style, but they're probably quite capable. So I think about where you can add value, and to work that way. I think you can also, you know, this mentality about we'll figure out what we want to do and then we'll go out. I think you can shift those ways of decision making. I think you can say, you know, if you're developing a program, saying, okay, well, I'm going to go and meet with our partners or our stakeholders and different people, and we're going to design that program together. We're not going to do the research first and then go out to them and consult. We're going to design it from the beginning together. I think you can do that. I think you can help them articulate what you need to do to jump through the funding hoops. I think there is a role to play in enabling us to do that. But, you know, do I need a gender expert sitting in Oxford to be working in the Philippines? Probably not. I bet you can find a gender expert in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You know, I've been hiring a number of consultants for different work lately, and you struggle because you think about the people you know around you, so you hire them immediately. And for certain things, I do that. But for other things, we've made a very deliberate attempt to make sure we hire people from the countries to do that work. And it's more work, you know, because they're not in your purview. But I think we have to be much more deliberate about doing that, making that effort, in the way that in the last few years we've made an effort to have women on panels and more female managers and women as spokespeople. I think we have to do that for actors in the global south as well.
Yeah, and it occurs to me,
white panels.
Yes. So I was saying that it occurs to me that one of the things about this is, like, it probably we have to be comfortable with taking more time about things. So from hiring people to designing programs and projects, and sometimes I feel like there is pressure for people to be stuck in this, like, right, there's a funding opportunity, we have to come up with a program, you know, and all of that feels like, and you know, we've only got 3 weeks and whatever it is, and all of that really feels like it works against this, you know. It just feels like it's unnecessary and it's not helping. And I question the role of funders in that as well, you know, like why is there suddenly deadlines, and why isn't there more time and space, and why don't they fund more time and space, as well as, you know, core costs for organizations in the global south, as you spoke about. But I think we also have to get comfortable with it ourselves, and we get caught up in that, like, you know, everything has to be done yesterday. But really change takes time, right?
I'm here 20 plus years in the sector. We're still fighting some of the same battles.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really learned from social movements is a sense of patience.
Yes.
Even though, you see the fighting strong at the thing, they also have a sense of patience of saying it's much better to bring everyone on the same page and then move forward. That comes with its downsides. Sometimes you're right. You do need, if there's a political opportunity, from an advocacy perspective, you need to take that political opportunity.
Yeah.
But you can only do that once you've built the relationships and once you have the trust and the right voices. So I just think the ways of the superhero northern white guy going out and saving the world, I think that's done. I think we're done.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, maybe we have to just be comfortable calling that into question as an idea that is over, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing that organizations can do, this one's quite obvious, they spend a lot of time postdocs, so I'm talking about safeguarding.
Yeah.
But how do we change the culture of organizations? I actually came across an article today about creating leadership that is comfortable with hearing truth.
Yeah.
Within our own organizations, that truth to power scenario, how do we breed a culture of humility and enabling staff to speak truth? I've been in situations in my younger days where I faced mild sexual harassment, nothing on the par of what people faced in Haiti and elsewhere. But just minor derogatory comments about my gender that constantly make you feel a little bit belittled and so on.
Yeah.
I was not made comfortable speaking that when I spoke out about it. Now I think things are changing, but have they changed enough? And I think that comes along with not just on gender issues and sexual harassment, but across the range. There's a lot of, you and I both know there's mismanagement of aid spending. There's odd power dynamics happening in country offices all over the world, or within organizations. And which is some of the things that was revealed, I think, as part of the scandal. And people just don't feel comfortable about speaking that truth to power. Yeah. You're made to toe the line. You'll harm the brand if you say anything bad about your organization. We don't want to harm aid. The 0.7. That's one of the biggest reasons you're not allowed to say anything wrong about the aid sector, because we'll threaten the 0.7. It's a target, and that the quality of that spend, we're seeing where the government's going with that in the UK with the direction of that spend now. Yeah. Which is privatized spending. I think the target personally is irrelevant.
Yeah.
We need to breed cultures that are comfortable with truth, honesty, and power, and dissent. Now, you don't want to completely fractured sector and organization, everybody infighting all the time. So how do you breed that culture that says, okay, these are really useful. How do we reflect and move forward?
Yeah. And I feel like it takes, like you said already, it takes leadership that's willing to hear truth, really, doesn't it? And hear questions and hear problems.
Yeah. And and it goes both ways. I mean, I've been in a leadership position where my staff spoke the truth to me, and I didn't agree with them, but we went through a process and hopefully came up to an agreement and moved forward. It's very challenging. It's very challenging, but I think we need more of it.
Yeah. And maybe we need, we need the kind of support for people in leadership positions trying to be that, because actually the reality of trying to be it makes your job even harder than it already is, right?
Yeah. No, it does. And I think that's why we probably don't always attract the right leaders in these roles, because they are difficult roles. But at the same time, boards are always looking for this superhero to oversee organizations that can show leadership and strength and vision. In the international development sector, vision is not the domain of one person.
No,
vision
that's
is the domain of a community of people north and south. We've got to really change the mindset around what that means.
Yeah. It's like and I've written about this, I think, but it's like we're replicating the thing that we're trying to oppose when we have these organizations that are like kind of corporate cultures and brands and like you said, appoint leaders that are really on whatever that for that kind of world. And then we're trying to resist kind of corporate capitalism and everything it stands for. It's kind of, there's this massive mismatch that, you know, doesn't work for most people within it, I think, sometimes. So yeah, they're big questions. What I want to ask you something to end. Like what would you like to say to conclude? I was going to say what three things.
Remind me who my audience is. These are people working in the sector. Northerners mainly?
Yeah, a mixture.
Yeah. Well, I think that truth to power is a really important message. And, you know, I've been branded a troublemaker in organizations. And I speak my mind. I'm direct. I'm North American, Canadian. I have to point that out. Mm-hmm. But I'm direct, and you know, certainly in a UK context, it doesn't always go down very well. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. I think having both empathy for people you're working with, and I would include leaders in that, actually, mm-hmm. for the challenges that they're facing. So, you know, if you're approaching your leadership about doing something different, have an empathy for their position, mm-hmm. but also don't be afraid to speak out and speak that truth. Yeah. And if you're in a leadership position yourself, you know, as a manager, a senior manager, really think about the principles of what you do have power over. Okay, so if that's commissioning, if that's programming, if that's decision making, if that's leadership, if that's management, whatever that is, mm-hmm. what are the principles you believe in the outside world, and how are you taking that into your work on a day-to-day basis? Yeah. I think that's probably what you can do. Think about what you do have agency over. You know, the system, you know, one person can't change a system, but a lot of little acts can certainly shift that system. Mm. And then if you're really courageous and a pioneer, you know, start your own thing. I mean, this is what I would love to do, is let's reimagine the INGO of the 21st century. What value do we bring? How do we work with social movements? How do we strengthen our capacity to both raise resources but not have the complete domineering voice over how those resources are spent? You know, we won't all change the funding sector together, even those of us working with the funding sector, but we know that there are ways that we can nudge things forward. And I'm both a revolutionary and an evolutionary, I guess. So think about ways in which you can evolve things a little bit more quickly if you want to stay in the sector and make a difference. Yeah.
Cool. I want to ask one thing that came out for me from what you said. I know that I said that was the end, but like when you've experienced being called a troublemaker, what how do you deal with that? And how do you know, how would you speak to someone else who's fears that, you know, about?
Well, so I would do that differently now that I'm older than when I was younger. And it's harder when you're younger, when you're called a troublemaker. I guess finding some allies and friends to stand alongside you. Yeah. There are people who will do that, I guess. So it's finding a community of kindred spirits. So it's hard to be a troublemaker on your own. Mm-hmm. So I suppose in hindsight, when I was called a troublemaker, I wish I had done that with a community behind me. Mm-hmm. Now I do that. I check where I'm being a troublemaker from, so I know that at least I'm standing on solid ground. Yeah. I mean, I'm in a position where I have the luxury of doing that now, and if you get a little bit of gray hair, people tend to be a little bit more accepting of your troublemaker tendencies. Funnily enough. That's true. But find a mentor. Mm. You can find someone in the sector who can mentor you and help you, because there are constructive and unconstructive ways to be troublemaker if you're in an organization and want to continue to be.
Yeah, definitely.
So finding a mentor and someone who can help you do that in a way that is constructive, I think is probably what would be helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you for speaking to me and for your time.
Thank you for doing this. It's a great initiative. Well done.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. You've been listening to me, Marianne Clements, in conversation with Deborah Doane, and this is the Healing Solidarity Conference. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to spend a bit more time with the thoughts and ideas that we discussed in this talk or in any of the others in the Healing Solidarity Conference, don't forget that you can make a contribution to support the production of the conference and get access to recordings and ongoing conversations about these themes and ideas. Just click the link below this video to find out more.